Hi guys, so the podcast you're about to listen to is all about Capa and age. A few of the things that we thought about were, if a parent is dealing with this behaviour from one child, just how draining, how exhausting, how much of their resources go into managing that behaviour and the impact that has on them as a parent, and the fact that other siblings maybe miss out because of the effort that goes into managing this behaviour from another sibling. We spoke about, or Jane spoke a bit about, the window of tolerance. We talked about expectations. So siblings living up to other siblings' abilities or achievements, expectations placed upon them, the fact that one sibling does one thing is expected another does the same. We spoke about recognising the difference, though, between siblings. So the fact they might grow up in the same household, but they might have very different experiences in other aspects. So we also spoke about what happens when a new sibling comes along. We talked about treating children differently and that being okay. Thinking about when we recognise those differences, that it might be important to treat children differently because of those differences. Loads of different things. I hope you enjoy it. So hello guys, and welcome to the next instalment of the Capa podcast. My name's Matt, and I'm joined today with, by Jane and Helen. How you doing, guys?
Hi there. Hi.
Hi guys,
okay?
Nice to see you. Yeah. Just looking out the window at the grey and the rain.
The grey and the rain, yeah. It's, which storm
Waiting
are we
for the
on
next storm.
Yes.
I can't remember getting to know this many storms.
I think we're waiting for
few.
Jocelyn. We're waiting for Jocelyn next, aren't we? And I learned that they're named after, some of them are named just after the public, and some of them are named after important people in the weather.
Important people in what way?
So like Jocelyn is a meteorologist, I think. I don't know her other names.
Okay. Storm chat aside, we are talking today about siblings and how Capa and this behaviour can impact on siblings in the home, because we talk a lot about child against parent aggression and violence, and there's a lot to do with child to the parent, that dynamic. But obviously, there's often siblings involved as well. You know, it affects everyone who lives in the home. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
A big topic for a lot of families, I think, isn't it? And something that families ask us a lot about, but often the siblings often get forgotten in what's happening, I think.
Yeah, I think at the start, certainly.
Yeah.
And forgotten in research as well. I mean, we said for a long time there was hardly any child-to-parent research, but even less research that looks at sibling issues. There's someone doing some research at the moment, which is great, which will add to that body, but not enough yet.
No, and it's incredibly important, because if we're thinking about, you know, the powerlessness that parents sometimes feel in this situation, well, I think you could times it by 10 for siblings as well, because, you know, as children, they have even less those feelings of agency and being able to influence their surroundings and what's going on. So I think it's a really important one. But I think, like you said, Helen, there's not been a lot of research into it. So, you know, bearing that in mind in our kind of conversation going forward, it might be kind of a bit more anecdotal in terms of our ideas and information. But I guess from your own work, how do you see sibling relationships as influencing, contributing, or being affected by Capa?
I don't know if we need to clarify or whether it will just emerge through discussion. But obviously, sometimes siblings are directly impacted because the child will be harming them as well directly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's typically, that has been very, very overlooked and downplayed. There's often been a thing that, well, you know, sibling rivalry is a common thing.
Is that because
everybody
think of that as
falls out
normal?
with their brother and sister, and so that's been really minimised by services for a long, long time, and not really properly understanding the harm that sibling on sibling behaviour that can have. So there's that, the kind of direct impact. Then there's the kind of collateral damage, if you like, of being hit in the crossfire. Then there's the impact of just not getting any attention because so much attention is going on the other child.
Yeah.
And then there's the other aspect where the next one coming up copies the same behaviour or uses the same behaviour for similar or different reasons. So it feels like there's a lot of aspects to this, and I hope we're going to explore all of them. I guess we know more about some of them than others.
Yeah, I think straight away the thing that jumped out there for me, I think all of it's really important, but is the impact that when a parent is so focused on either trying to solve the issues around the other child who is displaying the harmful behaviours, or sometimes they are just so worn out. You know, they're just so sort of drained by dealing with this behaviour that actually the other child will suffer just because the parent just does not have the energy that they otherwise would. And so they suffer in that way as well.
Yeah. And there's one more that I forgot. I'm going to put this one in there really to stir things up. That parents will ask for help with the child using the harmful behaviour. And so I don't know whether this is still happening, but when I was working, certainly parents were telling me this was happening, that social services would become involved and would say, you're failing to protect the other children, and they would remove the other children. So there's that impact as well. And that's a massive one.
That's still something that is relevant, because I think that is something that stops parents coming forward for help at times, because they are scared of that happening. You know, they're scared of the judgment that might come along with saying, look, this is happening at home and I can't do anything to stop it. It feels like, sadly, because it does happen. You know, it is something that people have to think about. Go on, Jane, sorry.
No, it's all right. I'll bide my time. I'm just listening. There's so many, connotations to it and angles that you can come from it. And I think, Helen, you've just kind of summed it up really well there about how difficult it is for parents, and just thinking about the parents that we have supported over the years and that have contacted us have come from probably every single branch of that, trying to, which child do they protect? Which child do they look after when a child is completely dysregulating and using aggression? Which child do they support? We've had children, in bedrooms hiding underneath beds, trying to sort of protect themselves and get out of the way. We've had children, jumping in the middle of altercations and aggression. We've had children and siblings that are being targeted by other siblings. I mean, we've had the whole gamut, and it's so difficult. And it's really nice to see that there is going to be some research coming out. But I think what I want parents to hear is that it's not unusual for this to be happening in the home with multi-sibling homes. It's something that we see all the time, and it's just not an easy fix.
Do you think as well that sometimes the fact that this behaviour might arise in potentially just with one child, and that parents are sometimes sort of scratching their heads in a way, because they're like, well, this child does not show this behaviour. The younger one doesn't show it, the older one maybe doesn't show it, and you have one child who's showing this behaviour, and it almost adds even more to the I don't know what word to use, but sort of that lack of kind of being able to understand where it's coming from.
Or you get families where all 4 or 5 children could be using the behaviour. And, rather than just one child, the cyclical effect of like all the children using the behaviour. And
well, like Helen says, when, one child may observe this behaviour and look up to maybe their older brother or sister and continue, in the patterns that are there.
But we have to always say, don't we, that none of it's inevitable. It doesn't just mean that because one is doing, the others will do.
Well, that's. I mean, I think that is. I hear that quite a lot. The parents are saying that they don't understand why one child will be using it, because, like you say, it's not inevitable that if one child uses it, the others will, because often it will just be one child using this behaviour. So then it becomes a kind of question of, well, why is this happening with this one child? And then you reinforce that idea that parents will feel really, really guilty as well for what the other children are experiencing.
Yeah.
Because they feel that they're not able to protect their children from this behaviour. And it doesn't feel fair or something.
And I think as a result of that, what we're seeing is you have siblings who are either overachieving and underachieving at school, are introverted or extroverted because they're trying to get a need being met because of this is happening in the home. We talk a lot to parents around the window of tolerance. And if a family living outside of their window of tolerance, and, we come in and we support a family to stop that behaviour happening in the home, suddenly you've got a family in their window of tolerance who can't manage being in the window of tolerance. And therefore another sibling coming along saying, hold on a second, I'm not used to this happening. I need to ramp it up because I'm used to living outside of that window of tolerance. And I think just to sort of say what the window of tolerance is,
go for it.
It's that place where we sit, where, we manage everyday behaviours. It's almost, I say to parents, like being in a river. Imagine being on a river on a boat with banks either side. Being in your window of tolerance means being on the boat with your family. And sometimes you might hit the sides because there's stressful situations that happen. It could be that there's the normal teenage arguing or sibling rivalry or sibling arguing that happens. It could be that there's been a loss or a death in the family or something's happened, which makes you hit the bank a little bit, but you can still stay on the boat. And I say to families that, when they're outside of their window of tolerance, the chances are they're all on the riverbank. They're not in the boat at all. And the riverbanks are your hypo arousal or your hyper arousal. And if you're used to being on the riverbanks, being back on the boat can be really hard. So we could get one child and one parent back in the boat, but another child could really struggle to get in the boat. I hope that's not over complicating it, but I often find by talking to parents in that, talking to professionals and parents and sort of trying to visualize what we mean by it can make it a little bit easier.
I think those sorts of images are useful for most people, aren't they? I think to have something drawn as a picture or a story can help us understand a lot.
We do quite a lot actually of drawing things out, encouraging, talking with parents and getting them to draw certain things out and being able to visualize what we're talking about. Because sometimes it can all get a little bit abstract.
Yes, the danger.
And it's about making it a little bit more real and helping people to understand what's going on. I see that, that sometimes the dynamic changes in a way that is a bit, like I said earlier, a little bit alien. And so you might notice that, as one child becomes a little more settled, another child may act in a way that destabilizes the family a little, and then leads to further incidents.
I remember talking to parents fairly recently about expectations of their children. And it goes back to this whole labelling theory. And, working particularly with, maybe where there's two siblings and one child is maybe, hitting all their goals. Maybe that a parent expects of their child, maybe what education expects of their child, maybe what society expects of their child. And they hitting all the goals and doing everything, seemingly to keep parents sort of praising them and saying how fantastic they're doing, and how parents say, but then I've got the other child that actually isn't hitting any of those goals. They're really struggling at school. They're the naughty child. They're the child that's acting out, and I don't know how to manage that. And I find that happens quite a lot. If you've got one child that's ticking all the boxes,
it's very hard to be the next one, isn't it?
Yeah, and finding life quite difficult, easy. You've got another child coming up that doesn't meet those expectations because it's struggling. Then parents not sure how to manage that, and how does the child live up to its older siblings' expectations?
Yeah.
So they're struggling.
Yeah. Do you think that around the expectations is that? I think sometimes, and comes back to this idea that I was talking about earlier on, where maybe one child will be displaying this kind of behaviour, and parents might think, well, they've all grown up in the same house, they've all grown up, we're the same parents, we provide in the same way, and it might be different needs or different abilities or different strengths.
Different perspectives, Matt. And we talk about perspectives all the time. You and I could go to the same event. You, me and Helen could all turn up to the same event, and we'll all listen to the same speaker or to the same music. And we'll come away at the end of it and we'll talk about, how did you find that? And we will all probably take something different from it.
Yeah.
Because that's our perspective. And I think that happens a lot in families. It's the perspective that the child is in, whether it could be come down to gender, could come down to age, it could come down to expectations of them within their family makeup.
Personality, all sorts of things, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Different preferences, different,
Yeah.
I think, though, that often there can be an expectation in society in general that we think in families we are all kind of the same in a way. We sort of should be. We should all sort of follow the same sort of patterns and pathways. And
the kind of, this is what our family is like kind of story, you mean? We are a sporty family. We are a musical family. We are. Exactly,
yeah. And that doesn't always reflect how it is in real life.
And do you think there's also, that as well? I'm going to go back to labelling and labelling theory. Sometimes we hear parents talk about, well, John has always been the difficult child. Always a struggle to get them to go to sleep. Couldn't relate in the same. They always struggled to go to school, And sometimes when you start putting these, what seem innocuous labels on your child, not purposefully, but just as a way to describe what's going on for your child, then actually that child can absorb what it's hearing, and it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy.
And it's a completely normal thing to happen. In confirmation bias, our brains are hardwired to do it. We think, okay, you've noticed something. So that thing of, you buy a new car or something, and all of a sudden, all you can see is your car everywhere.
Yeah.
You ever, and it's because, and before you never realised, and all of a sudden, you see it everywhere. It's not because suddenly there's loads more of those cars on the road. It's because you've just started noticing it.
Yeah.
Your brain's latched onto it, and you start seeing it everywhere. And it's the same with behaviour sometimes. We can worry about things and go, it seems like they're really struggling to sleep, or it seems like they always really struggle with this, whatever it might be, situation. And again, it's a normal thing for our brains to do, but then we start looking for confirmation of that viewpoint. And so this builds in our minds, we point it out, it can build in others' minds as well. And I think you can sometimes get those stories within families, between siblings as well, that can be really, really something to watch out for, where other siblings will continue the narrative around a child displaying really harmful behaviours at home. They are the bad kid, or they are naughty, or that is innate in them.
Something that really strikes me that kind of wanted to share really when we're thinking about siblings is, as you know, we work with the whole family at Capa, and we work with siblings directly impacted by another sibling using this behaviour, and how they feel about themselves, and how they feel that they can feel guilty about, is it something they've done? Have they led to something to create this behaviour in their older sibling? And the fracture in that relationship between the siblings, and the deep sadness that can bring to siblings, whether they're an older sibling or a younger sibling. But I remember working with with a younger sibling in this instance, and we were looking at, different houses and what it would look like in a house where maybe this behaviour wasn't happening. And he just wanted to have a relationship with his sibling that wasn't aggressive, where he wasn't scared when he heard shouting, that he didn't have to go run up into his room and lock the door because he was unsure of what happened. He just wanted to have a conversation where they could laugh, they could play, they could tickle each other without it falling into this kind of aggressive behaviour. And it's that loss really. And I think, and I know that's why we're discussing this today and highlighting it for families, that how important it is to acknowledge the experiences of everybody in the family, but particularly those siblings that are impacted,
Yeah.
and make sure that we provide support for them and not lose sight of, we're looking about a parent-child relationship, but looking at that sibling relationship and the importance it can have on somebody's development and upbringing and well-being.
Absolutely agree. So how do you feel that, I guess age difference or birth order, has an impact on this sort of behaviour and the sibling dynamics? So whether do we see this happening more with older children in terms of, the birth order? So maybe the oldest of three or the youngest of three, or I'm just making that as an example, or the middle child. Do you think it has any impact whatsoever? Do you notice anything in terms of your experience, your work?
I'm going to leave this one to you two because I'm really out of my depth here. And I mean, my only comment would be back to each family as individual.
Yeah.
And I think we need to go back to that. Each family, and we can't generalise. In what I'm about to say, it's not about generalising. But, we talked to parents and we know about, you've got a child, when another sibling is born, you've got that narcissistic cut that happens. And we talk about resilience regarding that. We talk about, perceptions regarding that. You could be a 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old that's had your parents' attention for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and suddenly a sibling comes along. And for some families, that can be a joyous occasion, and there's no behaviour changes whatsoever. And for others, that narcissistic, that cut that can happen because it was all about me, which, is a child's expectation of growing up. That the world does evolve around them. Absolutely. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. But then actually another child coming out and being like, hold on a second, I'm not sure I like where this... And we're talking about blended families and step families in all of this as well. Again, we can't generalise. But, it's that feeling it feels for a child to suddenly have to share the attention. And not because they're egotistical and want to share the attention. It's just, hold on, this is new. How am I supposed to manage this? And we all know that, don't we? When another child is born, we always say to a parent, I can take the newborn child while you spend a little bit of time with the older siblings because they're the ones that are going to feel it most. So we kind of know that that's what we need to do. But I think it's paying mindful attention to what's going on through all the personalities and what sort of messages a child can be getting. Again, we can't generalise. I'm not saying that the birth of a sibling causes this behaviour. It's one of those risk factors that we think about in the order of the child.
Yeah, and that's so important. I mean, I remember we've spoken about this pretty much every podcast I think we've done so far. But it can happen. It by no means, means that it will happen.
No. Yeah.
You have another child. Yeah. But it, like you say, it is a risk factor. And a lot of our job and a lot of when we're thinking about this stuff is just thinking about what could it be? What could the issue be? We don't know. We can't say, it's certainly this. It has to be this. But it could be, and it's worth exploring. Because I think it is such a massive change for a child when another child is born. That whole dynamic completely changes. Completely for everyone, because a family is a system with very finely tuned dynamics in a way. And if you make a change in one area, it's going to have a knock-on effect somewhere else. And that change might be a great thing, as we've spoken about, and lead to new possibilities and new ways of looking at things that are really brilliant for everyone and something to celebrate, and everyone can celebrate in it. Or it can be something that's really challenging. And all of a sudden, this is changed. And particularly for if that child is, depending on what age they are, their ability to sort of make sense of what's going on for them, it really has, it can have a big impact.
Well, it does shape you, doesn't it?
It does, and I think it is an important thing to think about.
It is, and how, again, it comes down to each child. Each human is individual, and how they, how they manage change and transitions and how they manage larger groups of people. I mean, particularly, if you've got a child maybe that's got a neurodiagnosis or a neurodiverse issue or neurodiverse challenges, and you think, what can that be like if you have 2 or 3 other children come into the home?
Yep.
and how
Absolutely.
they manage that change and how they can manage that dynamic of suddenly having more people around. Even something like that can cause, issues.
Absolutely. I think sometimes parents think about things in terms of, well, there's nothing I can do about it, so it doesn't even cross their mind. But if there is, if they have a sensory issue in some regard, the activity that is going to be introduced into a home when there is, say there's 3 children in the home, potentially of a similar age, the levels of just sheer noise and activity and action, that might be a factor to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And so, like I say, sometimes it's like, well, I can't do anything about it. And it's not to say that you are going to be able to solve the issue completely, but sometimes recognizing and thinking, oh, well, what can I do? Is there a quieter space that potentially I can create, or we can have an understanding as a family that this one child may need a bit of quiet time. We might have to sort of have a conversation around that, understand potentially the sensory needs.
And how can you manage quiet time if there's five people living in a house where there may be a 2 or 3 bedroom house? So the space is already cramped. Something else I just wanted us to consider.
That's...
Go on.
No, I was just going to say that is a really big issue.
Yeah.
And that sort of leads into wider
discussions and how we manage it.
Doesn't it?
But I was also that societal expectations that siblings should get on.
Yeah.
And how that can play out.
Expectations
around, well, they're siblings, they must get on. Oh, sometimes they can be a bit of rivalry.
My best friend thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And well, they should get on. Yeah, they can argue a little bit, but I know plenty of adults that don't have relationships with their siblings because they just didn't get on.
And it's really important to say that in terms of all of the discussions we have, we're not going to say absolutes here.
No.
We're never going to say this is definitely happening because A, B, and C. Or if this is happening in your home, then this will certainly lead to violence and aggression from a child. Absolutely not. But it's always about that curiosity and looking at possibilities for where is the potential issue here? What is really difficult? Why are you seeing this behaviour? And it's about keeping an open mind and looking at where those challenges might be that are coming out in this way.
And I would want to add on to there from a practitioner point of view as well. And I know this is something that Jane holds very dear, and you as well, Matt, I'm sure, that when families come, it's important to ask those questions about siblings, isn't it? To look at the whole family, not to just, if people are talking about one child, not to just focus all the help on that one child, but to look at who else is in the home, who else is in the family, who else plays a part, who else might be affected, to ask those questions, to be curious.
It's
Absolutely.
So important because, as services are constantly stretched and becoming more and more stretched, and one service may be there to support parent, one service may be there to support a child who's using a certain behaviour. What we need to make sure is the whole family holistically are being supported, because every single person living in that family will be impacted by the behaviour, which is, thank you for mentioning that, Helen. We do hold on to the fact that Capa works with the whole family, and that could be if your family is your neighbour. It could be if it's mum who lives 100 miles away, or grandma who lives 100 miles away. It's about the impact that can have on the whole family.
Also, adding to that, it's the impact it can have on the whole family, but the whole family everyone has a part to play as well.
Yeah.
Because it is all systemic. So sometimes you can make a change in one area. One person can make a change that will have a knock-on effect that leads to different behaviours in different places that, can alter the dynamics in the family. It can alter how things play out. And so it's really important to look at it as a whole, systemically, for the impact that it can have, but also everyone have a part in finding the solution to it as well. I think sibling rivalry is, I think it can lead to disagreements between children, and then to sometimes parents siding with one child that can then create an imbalance in the relationship between the parent and the child and the siblings as well.
And again, I think maybe that can go back to, expectations that we expect of each of our children. And if one child is doing something we expect them to do, and it's much easier to parent that child, then another child can say, hold on a second. I can see that I feel like I'm being treated differently here. Hold on, I'm not sure I like this. So that, can perpetuate that sibling rivalry, which then perpetuates the parenting and the splitting that can happen. How many times does a child say to you, am I your favourite? Have you got a favourite? It's kind of one of those jokes, isn't it, that people talk about, saying, who's your favourite child? But actually, that's a really important question for some children. They want to know. They want to know how you really feel about them, and do you feel differently than your other child or their sibling? It's we shouldn't negate questions like that with our children, because it's important to them.
Yeah.
And how we manage things like that can help, how siblings feel towards each other, how much we get involved in trying to placate siblings that argue can have an impact. Because, how a child sees it is very differently from maybe how we perceive it. I certainly know that happens within my own family. You feel you're doing the right thing, and suddenly your child will come to you and say, you treated them completely different to how you treated me. Oh my God, that's not what I was trying to do. So, all of that stuff that's left unresolved and unspoken about can create bigger gaps and bigger tension, which can then feed in.
Isn't it? There are big resentments potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
That resentment and that bigger gap, because we always talk about this behaviour coming from a relationship fracture.
Yeah.
How often is that at the root of this, there is a relationship fracture between parent and child. And sometimes those gaps and that divide can start quite small, but if it's unresolved or left unaddressed, it can over time begin to widen. And as coming back to the confirmation bias we were talking about earlier on, that can come from the child as well. They feel at one point that wasn't fair, and then they start seeing the unfairness in everything, and it's just confirmation bias for them that things are unfair. That the other child is the favourite. I always get treated differently, which can then further lead to a distance in that relationship.
It can do, but I think what's really important is that children need to hear that they are different from their sibling, and not necessarily you should be treated the same. And as parents, we try to be equitable, and we try to keep our children, making sure that if we give to one, we give the other. And actually what I think is really important for children to hear is actually you are different. You have different needs and different expectations, and they may feel like that's treated differently, but actually you're trying to do the best by 2, 3, 4, however many children you've got, and you're trying to give them equal time and equal, expectations. But actually, at the end of the day, for me, my children are different ages, so I expect different things from them. But age appropriate things,
people.
And they're different people, and they're different genders, and they like different things, and they talk about different things, and they need different things, and it's trying to address those differences.
Yeah, you will be treated differently because you are different people, and recognizing if a child does feel that something's unfair, sort of validating that, hearing that must be tough. So we're almost out of time, but I think we've kind of had two main threads to our conversation today. One is, this is how I have heard it, and I'm sure, as we said earlier on, it's all about perception and how we perceive things. We're all probably going to perceive it very differently. But for me, it felt like one of the main threads was the impact on siblings, and the other is how sibling relationships and dynamics can then impact on this behaviour.
So it could be two separate directions almost, isn't it, that you're talking about there?
Yeah, that can both lead to this behaviour in a way. So I don't know if you guys got any final thoughts on either of them. I feel like it needs a little bit of summing up. I don't know why. They don't always, but I feel like this one does.
Well, I think I would say, summing it up, that thinking about the different perspectives of siblings, whether it's the impact a sibling has because of the behaviour by another sibling towards the parent, is huge, but also thinking about the relationships between siblings themselves and the impact. And I think that they're separate, but they're equally joined. And I think for a parent managing it, it's confusing, it's difficult, it can be splitting, it can be, how do I best navigate through this situation? And I think hearing that you're not alone is important, and hearing that there is people that you can talk to get support can equally be important, but also recognizing the fact that actually it's just looking at things holistically, looking at what's happening with the whole family, when it's sometimes everybody can be really blinkered towards one particular behaviour that's happening. I don't know whether that's muddied it or clarified it, to be honest with you, when I hear myself saying it, but I think that we've got to consider it holistically and look at the bigger picture and look at the family as a whole.
And each family individually.